In the early hours of Sunday, April 19th, 2015, Vincent Viafore and his fiancé, Angelika Graswald, set out in search of adventure. But what followed was an irreversible tragedy. The water that day was cold, unstable, and neither of them was fully prepared to face what was coming. Vincent wasn't wearing a life jacket, and his kayak had a fatal flaw. Its drain plug was missing. The nightmare began as they tried to cross the river from Bannerman's Island, heading toward Plum Point Park. Slowly, Vincent's kayak began to fill with water until it flipped, throwing him violently into the turbulent river. Angelika called 911 from her phone, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. Vincent was gone. The river had swallowed him, and for an entire month it kept him hidden in silence. When Angelika was questioned about what had happened, her answers sparked suspicion. Her words didn't align with the idea of an accident. In fact, they hinted at something far more disturbing. She openly admitted to removing the drain plug from Vincent's kayak, and according to multiple witnesses, she was seen pushing his paddle away, stopping him from escaping the freezing water. The possible motive? A life insurance policy worth $550,000. Angelika Graswald was born into a modest, middle-class family in Rezekne, Latvia. Her father had been a police officer, though he later left the force to work as a trucking company manager. Her mother stayed at home, raising the children. Angelika had always loved the outdoors. She found peace in swimming, fishing, camping, anything that allowed her to escape the four walls of her house. Not because her home was a dark place, but because her soul was restless, always searching for more. After finishing school, she began placing ads to work as an au pair, a live-in nanny overseas. It was her way out, a way to travel, to see the world, maybe even learn new languages. She dreamed of more, of something bigger, and hoped that one day a family would give her that chance. She landed her first job with a Norwegian family living in Greenwich, Connecticut. Angelika was thrilled at the chance to explore the United States, but it didn't last long. Soon she grew bored of that life and decided to quit. She found a new job at a local bar, something that paid better and allowed her to stay in the country. Over the next 10 years living in the US, Angelika got married twice and divorced twice. She was still young, but deep down, she felt alone. Without a family of her own, she clung to every romantic opportunity that came her way. Sadly, the love of her life never seemed to arrive. She developed a passion for photography and began taking online courses to improve her skills. That eventually led to a job filming as a videographer for a while. Even after that job ended, her love for photography remained. She was drawn to the beauty hidden in life's simple things, and she loved capturing them with her lens. Eventually, Angelika began volunteering at Bannerman Castle, a haunting military warehouse designed like a fairy tale fortress. The structure stood alone on a tiny picturesque island in New York, completely uninhabited. While volunteering there, she took dozens of stunning photos of the gardens, the castle ruins, and the vast flowing rivers surrounding the island. Angelika would burn her images onto discs and hand them out to the other volunteers as keepsakes. Those around her described her as a charming woman, lively, hardworking, and always smiling. She had a sweetness that made her easy to love, at least on the surface. By September of 2013, Angelika was already 36 years old. She was working at a modest but cozy restaurant named Fishkill, located in upstate New York. It was there that she met the man who would change her life forever, Vincent Viafore, age 46. He was charismatic, outgoing, always smiling, always ready with an interesting story to tell. The 10-year age gap between them didn't seem to matter at first. What stood out, though, was that Angelika was older than the women Vincent usually dated. According to friends, he tended to prefer much younger women, most of them still in their 20s. But with Angelika, things were different. From the very first moment, there was a strong connection, as if both of them felt they were exactly where they needed to be, with exactly the right person. It wasn't just shared interests, they shared scars. Both had been through 2 failed marriages. They knew what it felt like to love and lose, to try and fail. Maybe that's why they understood each other so quickly. There was a quiet urgency in both of them, an aching need for stability, for something that would last, for someone who wouldn't leave them alone again. Vincent seemed to have his life in order. He worked for the New York State Office of General Services in the Department of Design and Construction, a respected man with over 20 years of experience as a certified code compliance officer and senior project manager. He lacked nothing: financial security, a wide circle of friends, and even a peaceful relationship with his ex-wives, which in itself was rare. Before long, Angelika moved into his home. Only a few weeks had passed since they met, but they seemed sure of each other. In just 5 months, they were already engaged. They had plans, wedding plans, dreams of a new life. They wanted to get married the following summer in Latvia, Angelika's homeland. To the outside world, they looked happy, united, in love. People around them spoke of an enthusiastic couple, full of energy and future plans. But as is often the case, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Just before the wedding, the relationship began to fall apart. Arguments became frequent. According to some close to them, it wasn't unusual to see them fighting over trivial things. Apparently, Vincent often threatened to kick her out of the house. Years later, after everything had exploded, Angelika would claim that Vincent forced her to take part in sexual games she didn't want. Submission, threesomes, things that made her feel uncomfortable and pressured. And yet, despite everything, they didn't separate. They tried to fix what was broken, to be again what they once were. But the truth is, when something is already shattered, sometimes there's no going back. And so we arrive at April 19th, 2015, the day of the kayak trip, the day everything changed. That morning, Vincent and Angelika woke up with a hangover. They had gone out drinking the night before, and even though they weren't feeling their best, they were determined to go ahead with the trip they had planned. They didn't want to cancel, not for anything. The weather that day was unusually warm and pleasant for mid-April in New York. One of those days that seem to call you outside, that beg you to enjoy the sun while it lasts. But forecasts warned that the weather would worsen by nightfall. Still, they didn't begin their journey until 4:30 p.m., far too late to venture into a river like the Hudson, a river as unpredictable as it is dangerous after dark. A few hours before they left, Vincent sent a text to his sister Laura. He told her exactly where they were going and even attached a diagram of their planned route. It struck Laura as odd. Vincent had never sent maps of his trips before. He never felt the need to explain things so precisely. Later, that detail would take on a strange weight. The couple's plan was to paddle from Plum Point to Bannerman Island, the same island where Angelika volunteered. She carried her purse and wore a life jacket over her sweatshirt. Vincent, on the other hand, had his phone, a camera, and a small bag, but chose not to bring a life jacket, a decision that would prove fatal. The trip to the island would take about 30 minutes. Not a long distance, but a dangerous one, considering the current, the cold water, and the late hour. Once there, they had planned a sensual photo shoot. Angelika had even packed fishnet stockings for the occasion, but the weather was far too cold. So instead, they walked the island, drank a few beers, and took some casual pictures together. Then, the weather suddenly turned. The wind picked up, and the couple decided it was best to head back before it was too late. They got into their kayaks and pushed out into the river. It was 7 p.m. The wind was harsh, and the waves grew stronger by the second, some rising over a meter high. Vincent's kayak began taking on water until eventually it gave in. It collapsed. Vincent fell into the river. He had no life jacket. The water was near freezing. Within moments, his body would begin to shut down. At around 7:40 p.m., a call was made to 911. It was Angelika Graswald. She told the operator that her fiancé had fallen into the river and that he was drowning. She gave them their location and begged for help. In the call, she seemed to be trying to steer her kayak toward him, but Vincent could barely do anything. He was at the mercy of the powerful current. He used what little strength he had left to cling to a small floating cushion. Sadly, that fragile hope wouldn't be enough against the river. The call continued. Angelika, crying, told the dispatcher that she could no longer see Vincent. The operator instructed her to paddle toward the emergency crews that were arriving nearby. As she tried to reach them, her kayak flipped, throwing her into the river as well. But unlike Vincent, Angelika was rescued quickly by one of the boats. That night, she was taken to the hospital and treated for hypothermia, while search teams worked through the darkness, unsuccessfully, trying to find Vincent in the river. According to the officers who spoke to her that night, Angelika appeared unusually calm, considering what had just happened. Supposedly, she showed little emotion. Her fiancé was missing, possibly dead. She had almost died herself, and yet, she seemed strangely unaffected. From that moment on, everything began to take a darker turn. One witness claimed Angelika had deliberately tipped over her own kayak after seeing the rescue boats nearby, as if to appear more vulnerable and steer suspicion away from herself. In addition, police believed she may have taken Vincent's paddle, stopping him from using it to save himself. The following day, Vincent's blue kayak was found near Plum Point, but it was empty. There was no sign of him. Search crews couldn't locate the body, and to make matters worse, the weather turned violent, forcing them to suspend the search. Vincent Viafore had vanished. And though it was first treated as a tragic accident, soon voices began to question the official story. People close to the couple began to speak, and what they had to say would change the direction of the investigation. According to family members, Angelika started acting strangely. She began giving away all of Vincent's belongings, including a meat smoker that had meant a lot to him, claiming he would have wanted his family to have it. At a family gathering held in Vincent's honor, Angelika was seen laughing, playing, doing cartwheels. That moment left his family shaken. They began to wonder, was she actually glad he was gone? On April 29th, 10 days after the kayak incident, Angelika returned to Bannerman Island with a group of volunteers to place a floral tribute in Vincent's memory. The police were there too, and they wanted to speak with her. At that moment, Angelika had no idea she was being considered a suspect in Vincent's death. The officers asked her to show them locations on the island that might help clarify what had really happened to her fiancé. That's when Angelika began making a series of disturbing statements. According to the report, police officers said that when they examined Vincent's blue kayak, they noticed it was missing the drain plug, the piece that keeps water from entering and sinking the vessel from within. Angelika told them she had taken the plug and had it stored in a drawer at her apartment. That, combined with her increasingly odd behavior, was enough for investigators to decide to take her to the station for questioning. There, she would remain for nearly 11 hours. 11 hours filled with questions, psychological pressure, and mental exhaustion. Officers framed the interrogation as a kind of therapy. "Let it out," they told her. "You'll feel better." Angelika, completely unaware of what was happening, never asked for a lawyer. She didn't realize she was their prime suspect. Still, she began to open up. She told them Vincent was controlling, that he made unusual sexual demands, often pressuring her into threesomes she didn't want. According to her, he wanted to dominate her, to make her submissive, and that made her deeply uncomfortable. It caused constant conflict between them. At one point, she said, "I wanted him dead, and now he's gone, and I'm okay with that." Though she denied killing him outright, Angelika admitted to taking the kayak's drain plug, but claimed she had done so months earlier, and that it had simply been forgotten in a drawer. Investigators questioned her about the paddle as well. They wanted to know whether she had intentionally kept it away from Vincent to stop him from saving himself. She denied it. She said she couldn't remember clearly. It was all so confusing, she explained, but insisted it was Vincent himself who handed her the paddle so it wouldn't float away. She'd left it somewhere nearby, she claimed, because she was too overwhelmed and needed her hands free to help. Near the end of the interrogation, Angelika began making even more unsettling remarks. She said she'd had a feeling Vincent was going to die that day, and that after it happened, she felt strangely at peace. The investigators asked why she had wanted him dead, and she confessed. She just wanted to be free. Angelika was incredibly naive. She had no idea that every word she spoke was slowly sinking her deeper and deeper. At no point did she realize what was happening. When the 11-hour interrogation finally ended, she asked to go home to feed her pets. But instead of letting her leave, The officers placed her in handcuffs and told her she was under arrest for the murder of her fiancé. That was the moment she finally understood that she had been the main suspect all along. Angelika Graswald was charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was later reduced to manslaughter. Police believed Angelika had deliberately removed the kayak's drain plug, intending for Vincent's vessel to flood. They also suspected that she had tampered with his paddle to keep it from staying attached to the boat, and that when Vincent fell into the water, she had pushed the paddle away to prevent him from surviving. But why? What could have driven her to do it? 2 life insurance policies, together totaling $550,000. Vincent had made her the beneficiary just a few months after meeting her. For some, that's a powerful temptation. Angelika, for example, didn't own anything of real value. The money could have been everything. Angelika pleaded not guilty to both charges, second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. Bail was set at $9 million as authorities feared she might flee the country and return to her homeland. While she awaited trial, Vincent's body was finally recovered from the Hudson River. It had drifted in the current for over a month. His family, at least, had the small comfort of being able to lay him to rest properly. That fall, just as the trial was about to begin, Angelika gave a press interview. She was asked about her statements to police, especially the one where she claimed to have felt at peace after Vincent's death. She clarified that what she meant was that she no longer wanted the lifestyle they were living. She didn't want the nightclubs. She didn't want the parties, the threesomes. She just wanted to be free of it all. But she insisted she still wanted to be with him. Experts concluded that the bulk of the water entered through the cockpit, through Vincent's own seat, when the waves began crashing against the boat. And with that, the piece the prosecution had described as the invisible murder weapon began to lose its power. To wrap up the case, the prosecution presented one final technical argument. They accused Angelika of tampering with Vincent's paddle, removing the ring that kept its 2 parts connected. But according to experts, that didn't affect its function. In fact, even if Vincent had managed to grab hold of it, it wouldn't have been enough to save his life. Still, the prosecution couldn't overlook Angelika's own statements, and the defense knew it. That's when the prosecution made an offer. Angelika would plead guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge compared to murder. She didn't have to admit she killed him intentionally, only that she recognized they were taking deadly risks that day when they stepped into those kayaks. Angelika accepted the deal on her lawyer's advice. Vincent was a grown man, nearly 50 years old. He chose to go out without a life jacket. He chose not to wear thermal clothing. He chose to paddle out, fully aware of the weather conditions. Seen from a neutral perspective, it seems unlikely that Angelika orchestrated a plan where he would have to make all those dangerous choices. He could have refused to go. He could have worn a vest. He could have dressed for the cold. His death was undeniably a horrible tragedy. But blaming Angelika just for being there, especially after the kayak simulations, may have been unfair. Nibiev's maybe, just maybe, she became the scapegoat in a story that needed someone to blame. Unless the prosecution truly believes she killed him, there was no reason to offer that deal. But sometimes the justice system isn't searching for truth, it's just searching for closure. One of the problems with modern justice is that constant need to find someone to punish. Sometimes an innocent person pays for something they didn't do, and other times, a guilty one walks away with barely a sentence, just so the case can be closed. In this story, no one won. Vincent drowned, and Angelika went to prison. Because of the plea deal, the jury never heard the 11-hour interrogation tape. Maybe that was for the best, because for many people, it's hard to accept how someone who just lost their fiancé in a horrific accident could remain so calm, so composed, even almost euphoric after his death. Angelika faced a sentence of 1.5 to 4 years in prison, the maximum allowed for negligent homicide. She ended up serving 2.5. In the end, Angelika received part of Vincent's life insurance payout, though the amount was never disclosed. Normally, convicted killers cannot receive insurance benefits for causing a death. But since she was only convicted of negligence, not murder, she wasn't legally considered a killer and was able to collect. Vincent's family did file a civil wrongful death suit to block her from receiving the insurance money, but they eventually dropped it. It seemed they simply wanted to move on with their lives and close the chapter. During the legal process, Angelika spent nearly $500,000 on attorneys. It's believed that whatever she received from the insurance went directly into paying off her defense. In the end, Vincent Viafore lost his life to the Hudson River, and Angelika Graswald lost her freedom and her reputation. The absolute truth may have sunk with that kayak, or perhaps it's still floating somewhere, between versions, expressions, and long silences. Was it a tragic accident fueled by reckless decisions, or the perfect crime disguised as misfortune? That's not for a jury to decide anymore. Now, that decision belongs to you. This was 44 Days. Good night.